We need to be more data-driven. That is, of course, something we hear a lot of businesses saying nowadays, but it's become something of a throwaway catchphrase. A lot of businesses actually find it hard to become truly data-driven, not because they don't have the right skills or the right technology, but simply because they don't have a clear enough understanding of what being truly data-driven means for their specific business. And of course, it's extremely hard to achieve an objective if you're not really sure about what that objective really is. It's like I always say, a target that you can't see is really hard to hit. The point is really that talk is cheap, right? We need to stop simply saying we want to be or need to be more data-driven and actually start achieving that by, first of all, properly understanding exactly what data-driven means to our specific business. So why do so many businesses struggle with a fuzzy definition of data-driven? It's not like we don't know how to set objectives, right? We've been working with SMART objectives for years, decades probably now. We know that to be really achievable, objectives need to be specific, measurable, agreed, realistic, and time-based. That's that SMART acronym. So if we know so much about and we're so familiar with how to create objectives, why is it that businesses struggle to set clear objectives around what it means to be data-driven? Well, personally, I think there's just two reasons. Now, let's be honest, be more data-driven can sometimes, maybe even often, be a leadership directive handed down with a sort of just make it so attitude. There's still business leaders and leadership teams that are content with seeing projects around things like improving data quality or building dashboards, seeing those projects as evidence that the business is on the right track to becoming more data-driven, when in actual fact, those things in isolation, they just don't make that so. They're the data management equivalent of running on a treadmill, right? Lots of energy going in, lots of effort expended, but very little at all in terms of forward progress. Now that is what we call data busy, which is the opposite of data driven. And I talked about the difference between data driven and data busy all the way back in episode 1. So I'll pop a link to that episode in the description. If you want to learn more about the difference between data driven and data busy, go and have a look at episode 1. Business does recognise that it's important to understand exactly what data-driven means to that specific business. I've seen lots of cases where people are actually really surprised at how difficult it can be to pinpoint specific achievable objectives on the path towards becoming truly data-driven. I believe that that's because data-driven, that's a phrase and it's a term that's said so easily now and so commonly that there's almost this subconscious expectation that if we as a business acquire some new data technology, or if we make some data infrastructure changes, or if we recruit some data scientists, these are all things that are going to help us to become more data driven, right? Well, of course, that just simply isn't the case, unfortunately. The fact is that pinpointing specific and achievable data goals along the path towards becoming truly data driven, that can be really hard, if not impossible, when there's a lack of clarity or understanding about what the business's overarching goals are, and also when there's a lack of innovation or innovative thinking amongst people about the roles that data can play and the jobs that data can do to help the business to achieve those goals. And that really important point brings me nicely on to the main topic of this whole video. So whilst it's true that data-driven can or often does have a subtly different meaning for different businesses, every business is in some way unique, right? There is actually a universal definition of data-driven, which I think it's important that we all recognise and we all remember. The nice thing is, it's a really simple definition. So are you ready? Your business is truly data-driven when data is measurably driving the achievement of your business's goals. That's it. That's what data-driven really means. When you think about the word driven in data-driven, ask yourself, what is it that data is supposed to be driving? And of course, that's the answer. That's what data should be driving. It should be driving our business to achieve its goals. Now I get that that might sound like a really obvious definition, but starting with that elemental clarity on exactly what data-driven really means, that's an essential first step along the journey towards becoming truly data-driven and avoiding ending up being just data busy. And here's why. When you embrace that definition of what data-driven really means, it helps you to realize and remember that to become data-driven, we actually first need to shift our focus away from data and onto our business's goals. And that's because we need to understand what those business goals are in order for us to understand, therefore, how data can drive the achievement of those goals. It's like I said earlier on, a target that you cannot see is really hard to hit. The nice thing is that when you build a data strategy from this starting point, the journey to becoming truly data-driven, that becomes really clear and is formed of just these 3 steps. So step 1 is to translate those business goals that we have a clear understanding of, translate those business goals into your data goals. So think about this in terms of what jobs do our data need to do in order to drive our business towards achieving its goals. That's step 1, translate your business goals into data goals. Step 2 is taking those data goals and translating those now into data capabilities. So of course data capabilities collectively, they are the things that we need to have and the things that we need to do in order to achieve those data goals. So that's step 2, translate those data goals into data capabilities. And then finally step 3 is to take that clarity on what data capabilities we need and plan for how we're going to achieve or acquire those data capabilities. So build that roadmap, build that realistic picture of exactly what changes your business needs to make in order to acquire those data capabilities that will achieve those data goals, which will drive the business towards achieving its business's goals. So let me wrap up by simply saying that we know that businesses are increasingly setting themselves this objective of becoming more data-driven, but that those businesses can find it hard to even get started because they don't know or they can't agree on what a real definition of data-driven is. The good news is that that's a challenge which is actually really easy to solve. What you need to do is just use the definition of data-driven that I've shared with you in this video, and that'll help you to launch your data strategy in the best possible way. Now, if you're creating a data strategy, I'm sure we're pleased to hear that everything you need to know is available online in a free, fully comprehensive guide which you can access at datastrategy.how. I'll put a link to that in the description of this video as well. There's also a data strategy management toolkit that we publish online that is also completely free of charge. It contains all of the tools and the templates and the models and the diagrams that you need to not just create a data strategy but implement it and communicate it as well. You can get access to that, you can unlock that online at datastrategytoolkit.com. I'll put that link in the description as well. So let me finish off just by saying that I hope you found this video useful. If you have, please like and subscribe, and also click that bell icon to be notified when I upload more videos about how to get data done.